Hello, and welcome to the workshop on Sage and Ginger Oxymel making by Health Wealth Abundance Incorporated. Thank you for joining us. And first, I'd like to start off by talking about herbal recipes in autumn and why I chose this one in particular. Well, in the Southwest, autumns can be really windy. We call it the Santa Ana winds, and that tends to really dry us out, and that wind will stir up all kinds of things into the air like pollen, spores, other microbes, and eventually that makes its way into our noses. That's where the hay fever comes in. So we try and create different herbal recipes during this time that are going to help aid us in building our immune systems, and they will eventually carry us through to the winter and then into the spring months. Oxymels in particular are really good for our immune systems because they're made with both apple cider vinegar and raw local honey. You can use store-bought honey, it's just not the same quality, and I'll explain why in just a few minutes, but this is why we use Oxymels, because not only has it been tried and tested for a very long time, actually since like the 7th century AD, they've been documenting this type of an herbal remedy for fighting off colds, flus, helping with upper respiratory issues, dry coughs, sore throats. Sage is really good for any kind of throat issues or upper respiratory issues, and ginger is really good for warming the system. I'll get into that in just a sec. And so let's talk a minute about apple cider vinegar and why it tends to be so good for us just by itself. Apple cider vinegar is really good at maintaining our pH in our body. We have a blood pH that is usually between 7.35 and 7.45. And it starts out alkalized in our mouth, but then once we get down to our tummies, that hydrochloric acid inside of our bellies will really bring our pH down. It's down to like a 2 or a 3 ideally. And then once it works its way through the pyloric sphincter, past the liver, and into the small intestines, the pancreas takes over and will secrete bicarbonate. And that's an alkalized molecule that will balance out that acidity from the chyme that's produced from the stomach and the HCl. So you go from alkalized mouth to acidic stomach to alkalized small intestines, and then once it works its way through the small intestines to the large intestine, now you're back to an acidic condition. So all in all, what you're trying to do is maintain a balance of your pH in your body. And apple cider vinegar is a very weak acid. It's 5% acid, and it really works on helping balance that pH. In fact, if you have any issues with not being able to produce enough hydrochloric acid in your stomach, what the apple cider vinegar will do is help with things like GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, or just chronic heartburn, where usually the sphincter between your esophagus and your stomach won't close if the acid in your stomach is not strong enough. So if the pH in your stomach isn't low, then that's what will cause this buildup and backflow of that really burning feeling that goes up your esophagus and into your mouth. So a lot of people will take Tums for it, or Prilosec. There's a lot of different prescribed medicines out there. and it actually does more harm than it does good. Alka-Seltzer does not necessarily help. Milk, because it's slightly acidic, sometimes seems like it's helping, but really what we want to do is create a little bit more acid in the stomach, and that is what will help balance out your pH and help with heartburn. So that is one of the really, really good things about apple cider vinegar. If you were to just dilute it in warm water with lemon in the morning, it really helps balance out your pH. It also will stimulate the response of your immune system. And in your stomach, in your intestines, you have different levels of bacteria. You have the symbiotic bacteria, the commensal bacteria, and then you have the parasitic bacteria. And basically, between that good and bad gut bacteria, you want the bad to not outweigh the good, right? So the apple cider vinegar is going to help your immune system with warding off that bad gut bacteria, which will help with preventative measures of infections or chronic diseases that could begin because of the inflammation that those bad gut bacteria will cause. It also is really, really good for blood flow. And if you have proper blood flow, then you have usually a better blood pressure. And ideally, you want your blood pressure to be 120 systolic over 80 diastolic. And this really helps with being able to get your blood flowing to all extremities, oxygenating each of your cells, which is ideal. That way you have more energy and you have more ability for your body to do the work that's needed in order to fight off any kind of start of dis-ease in the body. Apple cider vinegar can also help with cholesterol levels if you take it daily with warm water and lemon, like I was talking about. That's because it does help with blood flow, and typically what ends up happening is we get too much fat buildup in our blood system, and if we can't push those fatty acids into the more of the periphery instead of to our organ systems, then what ends up happening is we get a backup of fatty acids, and those will end up causing clogs or atherosclerosis, and that is just a leading cause of heart diseases, like atherosclerosis is one of them, but you can end up with heart attacks, you can end up with trans-ischemic attacks. You have to be really careful with proper blood flow and oxygenation to your cells. That way they can do the work to move molecules around where they need to go. So that's all aided by the proper pH in your bloodstream. It also helps detoxify the body, and right now that's exactly what we're wanting. The reason that it's helping detoxify the body is because it's helping maintain that level of good and bad gut bacteria, as well as removing any kind of metals and other toxins from the body that end up accumulating because of certain water that we drink or certain foods that we eat. Even our household cleaning products can end up internalizing different toxins in our system, as well as just going outside because there's so much pollution in the air these days. So I would definitely stock up on your apple cider vinegar, and all you need is a half a shot of ACV in warm water in the morning. And warm water and lemon will aid in balancing your blood pH anyway, but a little bit of ACV goes a long way. So as I was mentioning blood flow, it also helps with cardiovascular health, which is basically the same thing. Um, it's going to help, like I was saying, with cellular oxygenation. So I mentioned that. Also, I mean, this stuff is so good that you could literally do a whole workshop just on apple cider vinegar. But I will definitely save other ways that we can use ACV at another time. But let's move on to raw local honey. A lot of people will say local raw honey. I don't know why. I just like having it as raw local honey. But we can call it RLH for short. Um, and I believe that this is best because when you're getting raw local honey, the bees that are gathering the nectar from all the different flora that's around you locally um, is getting onto the pollen that is making you get hay fever or giving you those allergic reactions. So by taking the nectar from the plants that are giving you allergic reactions, they're actually helping you boost your immunity. They're helping you build antibodies by just having a little bit of that honey from the plants that are creating the issue in the first place. So if you want to eliminate or at least modify or bring down your reaction to these pollens and spores that are in the air, I highly recommend raw local honey. So honestly, scientists will say that it's like your own allergen immunology injections because over time they're going to stimulate your immune response and that's going to boost your immunity toward the exact same allergic reactions that you would receive if you were outside and it was super windy and you were getting pollen in your nose. Um, it RLH is definitely going to help with reducing your symptoms from a cold or flu, but it's also going to bring down the time frame that you remain sick. This is just like any other plant medicine, um, only going to work if you're taking a good amount of it at a time. So plants work on plant time; they don't work on people time, and a lot of people want to just take that one magic bullet that's going to fix everything quickly, but really all it's going to do is just put a quick band-aid over it. But what plants will do is work over time to eliminate the issue at its source. That way it doesn't really tend to come back. So when you continuously use these plants as medicine, then they work through you to break you down, purify you, and then put you back together in your purest form. So if you were to take 2 ounces a day of the raw local honey, it's really going to help improve your allergic response to your local flora that's in your area. So I was saying before that RLH is going to kill off bad gut bacteria. That's because the scientists will say that it's a natural antiseptic. So it's going to kill any of those little bugs that are coming into your system before that they can cause an immune response. So that is really ideal for infections or even healing wounds. Honey is almost the consistency of blood. It's more viscous, but once you consume it, it dilutes down because of the heat in your system. And it's just like the consistency of your blood. So it absorbs and it moves through you really easily. And it works on levels that we can't even fathom, honestly. So I highly recommend, even putting RLH on your outer wounds, as well as just drinking it and seeing what it can do for ulcers through your digestive tract. So if you think about the way that our skin works and it being the largest organ in on our bodies, you can imagine that our body is really just like a big donut, because our outer skin is going to extend through our mouths, down our esophagus, through our stomachs, down through our small intestine to our large intestine, all the way down to the rectum and anus. So essentially, our inner alimentary canal, or digestive tract, is our inner skin. And so it's all connected. And that's why, whenever you were to apply RLH onto the outer skin, it's doing the same effect internally as well as it is externally, to help as an antiseptic, fighting off any kind of bacteria or infection before it becomes an issue. A lot of the times we don't consider what we consume to be a part of our internal landscape, honestly, until it actually crosses over the membranes of our guts and becomes absorbed into the interstitial fluids and tissues. So essentially, that's why we call ourselves a donut, because if we were to put something topically on our skin, it only becomes a part of us and absorbed through us once it crosses over the what's called phospholipid bilayer of our cells, and then becomes internalized by our cells or into our bloodstreams. So that goes the same way when we eat or drink anything. Nothing will actually become a part of us and be transferred and transformed into working constituents that help build up or break down certain molecules to create structure, to regenerate tissues, and to nourish our cells. So that is essentially really good food for thought when it comes to what we consume and how our alimentary canal works. So one thing about raw local honey and the different microbes or microbiota or bacteria, they actually can't survive in the honey, and it's as if they drowned. It's like if you were to put water with soap on a plant, and let's say that there's aphids on the plant. The aphids are going to die because it drowns them. They usually breathe through their bellies. So the same thing with the honey. If these microbes can't breathe because of the viscous honey, they're going to end up drowning. They're going to die off. So that's going to speed up the process of your healing, internally as well as externally. And that is a key reason why it's an antiseptic, and why it'll help prevent any kind of infection before it starts. So this is also key to your inflammatory responses, because your immune system is going to secrete histamine and heparin in order to help your body create inflammation, because that inflammation is a telltale sign to your body to say, hey, you need to speed up and you need to start working and healing me. So that inflammation can be really, really uncomfortable, and it can cause even more problems if it's chronic. So in order to not necessarily remove, but definitely reduce this issue, a raw local honey will help you with that if consumed, in smaller amounts, but regularly, especially if it's raw local honey, like I was saying. So I would definitely say that raw local honey is one of the most ideal candidates for stomach flus and other acute pain and inflammatory responses. Whenever I'm talking about these kinds of herbal remedies, these are for acute issues, not for chronic issues. Chronic issues are something that you definitely want to find the root cause of. And that is for another workshop. But that's absolutely something to consider, is that there's acute issues which we can treat the symptoms of with simple herbal remedies like this one. But then when it comes to chronic issues, we definitely want to look deeper into what is the root cause of these issues and how can we nip it at the root, and not allow it to continue to be coming back. So when we do that, we typically use the whole plant to heal the whole person. And that is an alchemical approach with spagyric medicine. Flower essences help a lot. And this is a holistic approach because it helps heal the person's mind, body, and spirit instead of just one thing like the body or the mind. So when we talk about raw local honey, we're talking about organic, raw, non-distilled, non-filtered honey. And that really is what sets it apart from that store-bought honey. Because when honey is industrialized, they're going to take away so many of those health benefits that raw local honey has. When they are commercializing honey, they actually heat it to high temperatures and allow it to go through a filtration process, just like they're doing with refined flour these days. They're taking out all of the good parts of that grain and leaving the parts that aren't as good for us or don't really have any kind of nutritional value in them, just so that they can have better shelf life. So that's the same thing with this honey. They are wanting it to have better shelf life, so they heat it at high temperatures and then put it through a filtration process. That's going to take away so many of the flavonoids. Flavonoids will be rich in antioxidants, and that will help heal us. It takes away free radicals from our bodies. I can't tell you enough about how wonderful raw local honey is, and I highly, highly recommend using that over your store-bought kind to make different plant medicines, as well as using for teas, infusions, etc. In our SoCal area, I am in the Inland Empire and close to Temecula and Riverside and Corona areas, Fallbrook, those kinds of areas. So back in Fallbrook, there's a few places off Highway 76 Bonsall that usually have some farm stands up, and there's a lot of raw local honey that you can find through there. There are actually natural food stores that sell raw local honey in big bins. And then there's also places like at the Christmas patches, sometimes they have them. They definitely have them at pumpkin patches, but that's over with now. But I have two definitely that I recommend that I just recently found. There's one called John Lucacci and Son Beekeepers and Honey Company, and you can contact them with this number 714-458-7719. And then there's also the Temecula Valley Honey Company. Now both of them are really, really good and amazing honey from the local area. The only thing that I like more about John Lucacci and Son Beekeepers and Honey Company versus Temecula Valley Honey Company is that John Lucacci bottles and stores his honey in glass jars. And from what I've seen with Temecula Valley Honey Company, they have a lot of plastic that they use. And I just try not to use the plastic. I would much rather use a glass jar because then it's reusable and it's cutting down on, factory making of plastics. And, eventually plastic ends up going into the ocean and causes a lot of big issues out there. I don't know if you're familiar with the plastic island that they have in the ocean, but I'd rather not endorse that kind of endeavor. Now, on to the benefits of an Oxymel. We talked about apple cider vinegar and raw local honey. Those are two ingredients that are in an Oxymel. But in Oxymel itself, when those two are mixed together, they're going to be incredibly restorative. And when you just take a half of a shot of this Oxymel with the herbs infused, it gives you so much energy. It just makes you feel all around good. It's really going to help with just your whole well-being. I get more strength after I drink it. I just feel like pumped up. I just feel really good. Instead of taking your morning energy drink or morning coffee, just have a half of a shot of an Oxymel and dilute it with some warm water with lemon. You would be amazed at the way that you feel afterwards. It's just incredibly restorative. It so with this particular one, it really helps with soothing sore throats. The sage is amazing with that. And same with the ginger. It's really good for your tummy. It's not going to cause an upset. Ginger is really good for that. Um, I personally take just a small amount and gargle with it, and I don't dilute it. I just swallow it afterwards. You can gargle, you can spit it out, but I highly recommend not, and really reaping the benefits of swallowing it, because it, like I was telling you earlier, it really helps with your whole digestive tract and balancing your pH throughout your whole system. My kids, fun fact, they drink this regularly, just to prevent immune issue, to boost the immune system and to prevent inflammatory responses. And it's usually around fall, winter that they take it in regularly. And in the summer and in the springtime, we do other remedies, but they don't dilute it at first. They take it, they gargle it full strength, and then afterwards they take in a little bit of water. So it's not, even for kids, too strong, but it also depends on what they're used to. So you just have to kind of play with it and do a little bit of experimentation. Oxymels are also an expectorant. What is an expectorant? It'll loosen up all of that, that phlegm producing in there that causes like these really bad coughs that just won't go away. And sometimes it feels like a dry cough, like where you're just hacking away, trying to get something up, but nothing's coming out, just a tickle in the back of your throat that just keeps making you cough. Well, an expectorant it's going to loosen that up, and it's going to produce something for you to be able to spit out eventually. Ideally, you don't want to swallow whatever phlegm ends up being produced and that you can get up and out of your bronchioles. You want to be able to just expel it from the body. That's the whole response of a cough, is that it's trying to get you to get that out as best as possible. Now, traditionally, how much honey and vinegar would you use? What is the ratio? A lot of the times people would say, okay, use 1 to 4 or 1 to 3 of vinegar and honey respectively. That means you would use 1 part vinegar to 4 parts honey, or 1 part vinegar to 3 parts honey. But I honestly prefer to use a 1-to-1 ratio, 1 part vinegar and 1 part honey, because I really feel like it's a perfect balance. It's going to give you that sweet and sour taste. Sour from the vinegar, sweet from the honey, of course. And both of them are so medicinally positive that ideally, this is what you would want to use. Apple cider vinegar, like I was saying, is just such a great medicine in and of itself that you don't really want to dilute that. You want it to be as strong as you can. And if you want to dilute the 1-to-1 ratio, you just use a little bit of warm water. What kind of herbs to use? There are so many different herbs that you can use in an Oxymel. I'll name a few. But for this one in particular, I wanted to use something that was ideal for the respiratory tract. I wanted something that was going to help with the idea of boosting the immune system. And I wanted something that was going to help with like sore throats. So I chose to use the two herbs, ginger and sage, but there are also really, really good herbs for these types of tissues, for your upper respiratory tract and your immune system. And just to name a few of them: elderberry, mullein, mint, rosemary, rose hips, nettles, lemon balm, and then, of course, cinnamon and oregano, and ginger and sage. So I could go into why all of those are good, but that would take a really long time. If you want, you can look up their benefits, or you can look into the blogs that I do on these. But the reason that these herbs are going to help in an apple cider vinegar or or raw local honey is because both of them are really good at extracting. They're what are called a menstruum. So whenever you take herbs and you try and extract their active constituents and get a lot of uh, their active constituents out of them, water can only do so much infusing. But apple cider vinegar is a weak acid. It takes a lot more out. Raw local honey is really, really good at extracting, almost as good as an alcohol. So it works just as good as a tincture. So the herbs that you would use in a tincture, like different stems, barks, roots, berries, flowers, that kind of thing, you can still use with these oxymels. That's why I say like elderberries are really good. Cinnamon can be really good. Rosemary, rose hips, uh, because like nettles would be good as an infusion with water. Lemon balm would also be a good infusion with water. Oregano, same thing. Mullein, mint. But the other ones, anything that's like a berry or a bark or a root or the flower bud is definitely something that you would want to usually decoct if you were going to do an infusion or a tea. So decoctions are going to be simmered for like 15-20 minutes versus, just having hot water poured over them and letting them steep like an infusion. So definitely with apple cider vinegar or raw local honey, it's not as important to do a tincture with certain herbs that will extract the same properties out. So I'm using ginger and sage because they're both warming, moistening, and soothing energetics. That's really important for these windy winter seasons. So I like to mix warming, moistening, and soothing with etheric tendencies in autumn and winter. Etheric and airy is going to cause lots of dryness. It causes spasms because of the cold. And that energy is best going to be counterbalanced with those earth elements of ginger and sage. So that's going to help us keep grounded. It's going to help us be centered. It will help with, especially this time of year, it gets really hectic and we end up getting in our heads a lot about like, what are we going to buy for our loved ones, and then you're out there driving and everybody is driving like crazy and, just trying to stay centered, focused, grounded, and not too stressed out or your immune system is compromised. These two herbs really help with that. They also help with sore throats and coughs. So that is another big reason why I'm using these two. Now, this is probably my favorite part, and that's setting the intention, a very, very strong intention before we actually get into making the medicine. And the reason for that is because our energy is transferred, it's transformed through our hands and through our minds into the medicine that we make. Ideally, we want to set a very strong intention and have a good centered, grounded energy about us before we begin. So let's cultivate that space. Let's make room for openness, for our intentions in making the medicine. Now I'm going to invite you on a deep journey to go inward. And to do this, we will go into an intention-based meditation. I'm going to give you some time to create a space where there are no distractions and outside noise. Once you have this space in place, find yourself in a seated position, either in a chair with your feet rooted to the earth or on the floor with your legs crossed. Imagine your spine completely and comfortably aligned, like a long thread of beaded pearls. Keep your back strong and your front soft. Now let's begin by slowly closing our eyes. Take a few intentional breaths, a nice deep breath where the air has filled up your lungs. And now exhale long and slow as if you were blowing air into a balloon. Very good. Now let us repeat these breaths a few more times. Deep, short inhalation filling your lungs. Long, slow exhalation into a balloon. Deep, short inhalation filling your lungs. Long, slow exhalation into a balloon. Very nice. Now continue to just breathe naturally. Keep your eyes closed. And I'd like you to take a look inside yourself. See if you can find a word or a feeling that describes how you would like this medicine to work. Just one or two words. Maybe your words are based around love, the intention of infusing love into your medicine. intention of infusing deep healing into your medicine, maybe even both. Whatever your words that come may be, I ask you now to bring a quality of focus to these feelings and words and hold on to them with all of your intention. Keep a focus, an attentive intention. Let this quality fully register in you and fully come into your conscious awareness. Just breathe easy and effortlessly and sit with this desire or feeling, this seed of intention. I'm going to leave you for a few moments to breathe with the word or feeling of your choosing. You don't need to force anything to happen or change. Just remain quiet in the company of this intent and let it stretch and move within you. Now, repeat the word silently and see if it holds a sensation. Notice how it radiates throughout your body and tissues. Let it fill up through your heart center and spill out from your body, even into the room you're sitting in now. Keep your eyes closed and allow your heart to spill out from your body. Come back to my voice, feeling your body and slowly opening your eyes when you're ready. How was that for you? Do you feel the difference in your body? Is the quality of focus within you now? Over the next few weeks, after making this medicine, you'll be lovingly shaking the jar to help it macerate. This allows the herbs to infuse fully into the vinegar and honey. When you do, remember this intention that you just set and allow that energy to pass through your body into the medicine. Now we are ready to begin. So let's get into the kitchen, shall we? So a quick reminder, this preparation is only going to take us like 10-20 minutes max. So you're going to need a pint-sized mason jar with a lid And if you don't have a plastic lid, you're going to want to grab either wax or parchment paper. I like using wax paper for this. Parchment paper I usually save for baking. But you're going to want to set that on top of the mason jar before you screw on the metal lid, because that apple cider vinegar, because it's acidic, it will create rust on your metal lid if you don't use the parchment paper or wax paper. A couple of other things that you're going to want, you'll want a measuring cup, of course your apple cider vinegar and honey. You'll want like 2 inches of fresh ginger and a half a cup of either fresh or dried culinary sage. And you're just going to chop it up. The way that you can chop it is by using scissors if it's fresh. If it's dried, you can just crush it up within your fingers. And then the last thing that you're going to want, and this is after it macerates 3 to 4 weeks, is a fine mesh sieve. But you don't necessarily have to worry about that today. The first thing you're going to want to do is put that sliced ginger, chop it, and set it into a measuring cup or into your mason jar. And then you're going to take your sage that you chopped, and you're going to add that to the mason jar. If it's all fresh herbs, you're going to want to fill it up to about 1/4 to 1/3. If you have some dried herbs, you want it to be filled more like 1/2 to 2/3. Fill the jar up about halfway with the ACV, or apple cider vinegar, and like I was saying, traditionally it could be a 1 to 4 or a 1 to 3 ratio between your vinegar and your honey, but I prefer to do a 1 to 1 ratio. That's why I do half. If you want to use less ACV and more honey, then just go a little less than half on the ACV. And then you're going to add your raw honey to fill up the jar now. The honey will be viscous at first, but the apple cider vinegar is going to help honey dissolve into the Oxymel, so don't worry about how thick it is at this point. If you get any on the rim of the jar, just go ahead and wipe that off, and make sure to put your wax paper over the jar if you're using metal, and then give it a nice loving shake. This is where you're going to actually let the medicine sit in waiting. So you'll just put it in a nice, cool, dark, dry place for about 4 weeks. Make sure you label your jar and then mark a calendar so that you know when you're going to be straining off your herbs. So it's as simple as that. It really doesn't take very long at all. And that concludes our workshop. I really hope that you learned a lot about apple cider vinegar today and raw local honey. And I really hope that you enjoyed this workshop on Oxymels in particular. You can use that guided meditation for cultivating intentions anytime. And I really hope you get some good use out of that, because it's one of the best ways to set an intention for what they call the law of attraction. So if you want something to happen, all you have to do is take a little bit of time and really, really be attentive to what it is that you intend for the universe to take in, grab a hold of, and magnify it out into the cosmos. I promise you it will happen. I thank you again, and I wish you warm blessings